Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to The Walk. Today is Friday, November 1st, and we just saw that these elders came to Ezekiel. Well, first, let me give you the side note. If you've not voted yet, go ahead and get out there and vote. Please vote for things that glorify God. All right, so we saw yesterday that these elders came to Ezekiel. They said they wanted a word from the Lord. And the Lord basically called them out on the carpet and said, you're coming to me, you're wanting my word, but yet here you are, you're still got idolatry in your heart. And you're acting like you've gotten rid of the idolatry, but you really haven't. God was in the middle of answering and giving his word when we stopped yesterday. That brings us to the second half of Ezekiel 20, verse 13, if you're following along. Then I said, I would pour out my wrath upon them in the wilderness to make a full end of them. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I have brought them out. So God is saying, I will not let my name be torn down. I will be true to my word. Moreover, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land that I had given them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most glorious of all lands, because they rejected my rules and did not walk in my statutes, and profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after the idols. Nevertheless, my eye spared them, and I did not destroy them or make a full end of them in the wilderness. So God is saying, I'm the one that remained faithful. You did not. And I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, nor keep their rules, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules, and keep my Sabbaths holy, that they may be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes and were not careful to obey my rules, by which if a person does them, he shall live. They profaned my Sabbaths. So basically what they did is they did not keep the Sabbath holy. God's rest is very holy. He defined that. He portioned that out for them. And instead they're rejecting it. Now we're in the second half of verse 21. Then I said, I would pour out my wrath upon them and spend my anger against them in the wilderness. But I withheld my hand and acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I had brought them out. Moreover, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them among the countries, because they had not obeyed my rules, but had rejected my statutes and profaned my Sabbaths. And their eyes were set on the fathers' idols. Moreover, I gave them statutes that were not good, and rules by which they could not have life. Then we get to verse 26. And I defiled them through their very gifts, and in their offering all their firstborn, that I might devastate them. I did it that they might know that I am the Lord. So God is using his power to correct them and point out the fact that he is their Lord. So what are these statutes and the laws? Well, in the Cultural Study Bible, there was an interesting note about that, which said, the Hebrew terms used here are extremely important to a proper understanding of Ezekiel's controversial statement. This is not a reference to the law given at Mount Sinai, and the Hebrew word Torah is not used. The Hebrew word the NIV translates statutes is the same Hebrew word that is translated decrees in verse 24, that in verse 24 is feminine rather than masculine. The Hebrew word the NIV translates laws is the word for God's judicial decisions. Okay, so let's think this through. What is a decree? A decree is a statement that comes from a king and says, this is the rule, this is what we will do as a nation, this is how we will move forward. All right, so what is a judicial decision? A judicial decision is when a dispute comes in front of the judge and the judge says, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. The consequence, going back to that Cultural Study Bible note, the consequence of Israel's unfaithfulness then was that God decreed events that were not in their favor, and he made judicial decisions that threatened their survival. This resulted in God's use of forces that devastate Israel, such as war, famine, plague, foreign armies. God will not tolerate their unrighteousness and their idolatry, and he's putting an end to it, and he put an end to it with this exile. So God is saying, I will not be mocked, my name will not be torn down, and you will either follow my rules, or you're not going to be able to be a part of that land that's filled with milk and honey, which is all about that exile. How does that apply to us? We have God's holy word right here. It's right here in our hands. And how many things do we do instead of getting our nose in this Bible, instead of spending that time in God's word? We want to do anything else other than reading God's word. And you know, I'm a person that loves to read, and I am a big reader. And you know what? A lot of times I am reading a book that is something other than God's word. Yes, it may be about God. Yes, it may teach me about God's word, but I'm not spending enough time in this word. And I got really convicted about that as I did this study. And I'm praying that you are too. Instead of reading about God's word, let's read his word. Let's just do that. Today is Friday, so I'm going to remind you there's no video Saturday, Sunday. I'll be back with you Monday. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.